Ahoy, adventurers! Your old buddy Hambone is here with another coupon code from our friends over at Noble Knight. This month, the coupon code is Vintage, and it's good for $5 off an order of $25 or more, either in-store or online. And this code is good through August the 9th. So that's $5 off orders of $25 or more. Now is a great time to think about getting some curbside pickup if you're local to Noble Knight, or if you're sitting home looking for something new and fun, or maybe something old to complete your collection. There's never been a better time than now to buy games. So make sure when you're checking out at Noble Knight Games, you use the code VINTAGE to get $5 off an order of $25 or more now through August the 9th. Stay safe out there, and may the dice always roll in your favor.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and today Stu and I have an amazing guest. Banana Chan from Game and a Curry is here to talk about her brand new Kickstarter for Jiangshi, coming out July 14th on Kickstarter from Game and a Curry and Wet Ink Games. So no jokes today, folks. We're going to get right into the show. And without further ado, the prolific Banana Chan. Hey, Banana, how's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, it's our pleasure. You know, like everybody else, we're just trying to survive in the apocalypse.
Exactly.
So, Banana, you are just hot on the heels from Battle of the Boy Bands, which just wrapped up a couple months ago, and you've got something brand new about to hit Kickstarter on July the 14th, Jiangshi, Blood in the Banquet Hall. So why don't you tell our listeners a little about this game?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jiangshi Blood in the Banquet Hall is a tabletop RPG where the players take on the role of a Chinese family running a restaurant in Chinatown in the 1920s. So the game, in the daytime, the family is, faced with oppression and systemic racism and all the stresses of like running a restaurant because you have to keep your customers happy. Whereas at night, Jiangshi hopping vampires come out and they attack everyone and they try to destroy the restaurant and destroy the family. So that's the game in a nutshell.
That's awesome. I mean, for me personally, as a guy who grew up in the restaurant business, I think the running a restaurant in the 1920s aspect is maybe more horrifying than the vampires.
It's very stressful. Yes, absolutely. So one of the consultants that we have on the project actually has family who's run Chinese restaurants in Chinatowns for a long time. So that's one of our consultants. She's been really helpful, like telling us about, what it's like behind the scenes and making sure that we get everything right.
I think that's the kind of authenticity that people look for because they may not have ever met a vampire, but they've definitely been to and involved with restaurants.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's surprisingly a lot of history behind Chinese restaurants in Chinatown, especially, the one in New York and in San Francisco, because those are the ones that sprouted up first.
So that is an amazing bit of history. How do the hopping vampires tie into a story such as this?
So the hopping vampires themselves are this physical representation of the family's fears. And, in Chinese mythology in general, Jiangshi are these vampires that they're pretty prominent. Like you see it pop culture, you see it in, ancient mythology, or not so ancient mythology, but it's something that's like pretty prevalent in Chinese movies, Cantonese movies, Hong Kong horror movies. And we felt like this was the perfect representation of something that would be, equally scary and silly at the same time. So if players wanted to take, a sillier route, then they can go, they could go ham. They could like act like they're in Bob's Burgers and, use these Jiangshi as like funny little hopping things that are attacking everyone. Whereas if people wanted to go for a more serious route, it could definitely take on, a tone that's closer to a TV show like Warrior or something even scarier.
So you have the best of both worlds. You've got Grindhouse and you've got Good Burger.
Exactly, yeah.
I love the fact that you're using hopping vampires. I always feel like they kind of get short shrift in the overarching kind of vampire mythology. Like they're terrifying on the one hand, but they hop, you know? Like it's the least threatening kind of sort of movement, but I've always been fascinated by them. I think it's such a cool idea.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of conflicting stories about the backstory for these vampires. So they're a combination of what we know as zombies and vampires in popular culture. And one of my favorite backstories about them is that a monk was trying to transport bodies from one location to another to their burial site. And they were a little lazy at the time, so they enchanted a whole bunch of bodies, stuck some bits of paper, their food talismans, on their foreheads and made them hop towards their location. So that was like an easy way for them to transport them from point A to point B. And the reason why they hop is because they're suffering from rigor mortis.
That's amazing.
And unfortunately, during their travels, some of like the paper fell off, and that's how we get the Jiangshi.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, it's very fun.
So this is theoretically set in a Chinatown, right?
Yes, so we have a few different Chinatowns that the players can choose from, mainly the San Francisco one, New York, Vancouver, Toronto, and LA. So those are the 5 that you could choose from. But then there are also other adventures that are one-shots that players can, play out. And these do not necessarily have to be Chinatowns. We're inviting a lot of different people of color to write in their own adventures so that we can expand the world and, introduce other points of view and other, stories.
The thing that I think is really cool is the fact that they're not menaced by something that is where they have moved to. It's something they've sort of brought with them. I think that interplay is really cool in the fact that, like you said, that they are representative of their sort of fears and anxieties. Can you speak a little bit more about how those two things interlock, like the horror and the anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Jiangshi, like I said earlier, there are physical manifestations of their anxieties and the stress that they face during the day. So whether it's oppression from, systemic things that are happening in the world, or just trying to maintain, balance within the family itself as, new immigrants, it's all sort of encapsulated into this Jiangshi figure. And player characters can also turn into Jiangshi. So as they take on, physical harm or stress, they can take these cards that cover up their character sheet so that they turn closer and closer into Jiangshi. So these are loss of self cards, but once they have all the loss of self cards, they flip everything over and then they turn to Jiangshi and they have Jiangshi superpowers and everything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting because one of the things that I think that makes a really great horror is the idea of loss of self. And that's just sort of like a basic thing. Like we want to be us, right? We don't want to lose ourselves. Mm-hmm. But then it becomes like a cultural thing too, because, outside stressors kind of forcing assimilation or oppression. Like I think that there's just like so many different routes that you can kind of play with these couple ideas. And I think that's really interesting.
Thanks. Yeah, we were heavily inspired by a lot of horror movies, and also Jordan Peele's work. That was definitely when we started writing this game. I think it was in 2018, and we had just seen Get Out, and I think Us was about to be in theaters or something. And a lot of that kind of horror that just like made an impact on, or at least my writing. Sen probably has a different experience. Sen-Foong Lim is the co-designer in this, and he can working with him has been amazing. Just like going back and forth on the ideas and generating different horrors and writing this out.
Very cool. And it seems like you have a lot of great writers working with you, as well as amazing artists bringing this project to life. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about them?
Okay, so we have a lot of writers. So we have 3 consultants. We have James Mendez-Hodes, who does a lot of consulting in general. He did our sensitivity consulting. And we also got Ivan Wong, who is our translations and naming consultant, because neither Sen or I are very good at written word Chinese, unfortunately. So we had to hire on Ivan. And then finally, we had Sammy Lai go through all of the restaurant stuff just to make sure that it looked right. We also had them write a lot of stuff for us as well. So a lot of their voices shine through the text itself. On top of that, for the Chinatowns, we asked Kiana Shaw, Ross Cheng, and Daniel Kwan to write on those. And for some parts of the social groups, we also asked Janaea Kemper, who's a brilliant, just like a really smart academic who's like worked on so much, who's also been in the industry for forever, like doing LARPs and, talking about RPGs. And on top of that, we also have Kristen Devine. You might have seen her work with Renegade. She co-designed the North Sea epilogues. We also have Sharong Biswas, who's like this incredibly talented and smart, just designer in general. Like everything that he touches is award-winning. I'm like always jealous of, his creativity. And we also have Yoshi Creelman, who is doing a Japanese-American version of the game. So you'll be seeing some of that in one of the adventures. And we also have Carl from, you might know him as POC TTRPG on Twitter. And he's doing some work for us as well. And I'm really excited to see what he does. So we have a lot of people on the project.
That's a really long credits page.
It's incredibly long. We also have stretch goal writers, and it's just even longer.
Wait, that wasn't including the stretch goal writers?
No, that was not.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. We got on so many different voices, and we're just really excited about it. And our artists are also amazing. We have Kwan Chai Moria, who's just really talented. Like you saw the cover. I'm so happy about that. We have Stephen Wu doing some of the work that's inside the book alongside Noel Tien Nguyen Te, who is an up-and-coming freelance artist. And we also have cards that are made by Jabari Weathers, Robert Richburg, and Sadia Bias.
That's awesome. That is pretty much an entire sports team of talent working on one game. That's brilliant. And I really appreciate the fact that you have taken every possible measure that you can between the sensitivity consultant and even restaurant consultant. So that adds to me such a layer of authenticity to a game like this. And, I applaud you for that.
Thank you. We wanted to do our best to make sure that this game represented the Asian American experience. Obviously, none of us are a monolith, and we might be missing a few things here and there, but we're going to do our best with this. And if people would like to research more, would like to look for, more facts on American history, they can definitely look it up. We have sources at the end of the book as well. So if anyone's interested, there are websites, there are articles, books, everything.
So you even added an Appendix N to the game.
Yes. There's a lot of information there.
And that makes sense because every Chinatown is different, right? Like the historical and cultural factors that contributed to the creation of the San Francisco one is super different from the New York one.
Yeah, exactly.
When folks sit down to write an RPG, they think big. And big is kind of, hard. It's like the shiny lie, right? Because this is small and it's one restaurant on one block in a larger city, and it has such a very narrow focus, but there's such richness in what you could do with all the toys that you've kind of put on the table, just catered to this one small venue,
Yeah, absolutely. There's surprisingly a lot of history and a lot of stuff that needed to go into this, and including magic as well. Like Taoist magic is also something that we touched upon in here. I had to do a lot of research on it, and I suddenly started taking up Taoist magic as a thing, which somehow happened. I don't know how that happened, but there's a lot of stuff that needed to be touched on because this is something that's a little different from the typical like RPG. So we wanted to make sure that people understood what they're getting themselves into. We wanted to cover, all the different social groups, and we also wanted to cover, not just like the entertainment and politics and like, the political climate of the 1920s, but also, what types of religion are, are affected by Chinese communities. What are the different holidays? What are the different, beliefs in the supernatural, and also like what's bad luck? What's good luck? What's it like to actually have this experience? Oh, okay. We talked also about uh, you know, in the game itself, we also talk about what all the uh, I'm trying to go through all the stuff right now. Sorry. Uh, yeah, so we cover superstitions, we cover different things that are a part of Chinese culture in general, and things that we've maybe brought with us from the mainland to here through the diaspora and things that some people might not necessarily know because it's not commonly talked about. In D&D, you don't really talk about this kind of thing. You don't really see it a lot. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get as much as we can into a few pages. And if people get interested, they can, read more books or read more articles on it.
So when you say the word vampire, everybody thinks Dracula, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once you really look into Dracula, you see that he sort of represents a whole lot of very English fears about, continental Europeans and, invading foreigners, stuff like that. I'm wondering, do the hopping vampires and your immersion in sort of gamifying them in the context of this game, did you learn anything about what they kind of represent? Did they speak to you in sort of like a broader cultural way?
In general, there's always been this sort of fear of demons and of, the paranormal or the supernatural in many cultures. In ours, there is a lot of talk about trying to exorcise demons. It's honestly quite similar to a lot of exorcisms that you see on TV. And this is just through personal research that later on I discovered. But I'm going to go back a little bit and I'm going to talk about how paper talismans work. So paper talismans and writing in general was created by, and I'm probably going to say this guy's name's wrong, but it's Kang Zhe. And this guy basically saw a bird's footprints on the ground and decided that, this is how I'm going to start writing. This is from 2650 BCE. And this is this legendary figure in mythology. And when he started writing, he discovered that demons started becoming scared of him. And that was what a lot of shaman at the time, a lot of magicians started using as things to ward off demons. So the history of writing is really important in Chinese mythology and Chinese culture in general, because writing supposedly happened because it was to use magic and to sort of ward off demons. That's just one variation of this history. And with that, specifically in Taoist magic, a lot of people talk about Fu talismans. And what Fu talismans are, they're paper talismans that you draw sigils on. And when they become magically charged, you put them onto another person and you use it to exorcise them. From that, Jiangshi were, obviously somehow they added the whole mythology of Jiangshi because of the fear of death. You'll probably see this a lot in Chinese culture or Chinese mythology, that death is something that a lot of people are afraid of. Specifically, the number 4 is bad luck because it sounds a lot like the word death. So when you go visit China, or if you go visit anywhere else that has a Chinese background, you'll see that sometimes the number 4 is missing, but 6 and 8 are good luck. That's actually integrated into our system as well, which I could talk about later. But I think that the fear of dying or the fear of becoming something that's sort of dead, but not really, is really prominent in the mythology.
That's super interesting because paper and writing is how you play a tabletop RPG, right? So it's interesting how in a meta way, the act of playing a game is sort of like a magical system that you use to bind fictional hopping vampires.
Yeah, we even have these quote unquote spirit papers. They're actually fake paper talismans that you can draw on so that you can use that for, pinning onto the Jiangshi when you interact with them. So the family has to come together and they have to like think of a sentence or think of like a mantra that can bring their family together and use it against the Jiangshi.
That's so cool.
That is super, super cool.
Thanks.
So now, if you want to get your hands on these paper talisman, you have to kickstart the game. Why don't you tell our listeners when they can kickstart this game?
It will be out on Kickstarter on July 14th. So that's when the launch is. It's going to be a 30-day campaign, and the game itself is an original system co-designed by myself and Sen-Foong Lim. Obviously, anytime we talk about Sen-Foong Lim, we always have to have a board game element. So when we first started working on this game, it was all just paper and pencils. But then later on, it evolved into something with a board, and it's now got cards. Dice were always in the mix, but now it's like got more of a tactile feel. And so the game itself is separated into 4 quadrants on a circle. So you have your daytime phases and your nighttime phases. In your daytime phases, you have your morning and your afternoon. And during the evening, you have your nighttime and your dead of night phases. So during the morning, you have these restaurant cards that are dealt out to you that you have to complete, and you role play them out as a family, and you talk about these chores that you have to do. And then later on, service starts in the afternoon, and that's when, things get more stressful. You have to roll your dice from a family pool of dice, which are all D8s. And when you roll 4s, the 4s cancel out the highest number because 4s are bad luck. But if you have an 8, then that's like a major success. That's great. But there is also the possibility of rolling many, many 4s. So you might have like a major, major failure. And the restaurant board itself, it has specific powers on it. So sometimes it'll give you extra dice to play with. Maybe it'll help you, with your chores. But whatever they are, the restaurant itself is also sort of this entity that you have to take care of. So if you don't finish your chores, a part of the restaurant gets covered up, similar to your character sheet where, a part of it gets covered up. But if all 8 slots on the restaurant get covered up, then the restaurant falls into decay and the game ends. So that's one of the ways that the game could end. Another way that the game could end is if everyone's finished with a scenario or adventure and they're just like, okay, we're done. So those are the 2 ways that you could play it.
Well, yeah, because at that point, then you got to make way for the dinner rush.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like you said, there's also like the dinner rush for the nighttime phases. So you have like the dinner rush for evening. And then during the night is when the junk should come out. And so when you have your dinner rush, you have your customers that you have to keep happy, but you also have to fend off the Jiangshi, making sure that they don't attack your customers or attack you.
Oh gosh, they could attack the customers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I can't imagine the Yelp review after that.
Hopefully they come back.
So this game comes out on the 14th of July. You have 30 days to kickstart it. Can you tell our listeners about any of the stretch goals, or is that all top secret?
A lot of the stretch goals are additional cards added. So we have something that's called a Mong deck. So Mong means dream in Cantonese. But in this game, the Mong are generally bad. They're bad dreams that you have that also cover up your character sheet. So they're all just artwork. It's all black and white artwork. And if you get like a black and white card, that's a nightmare. You have to role play it out. You have to talk about it with the rest of the group. But if you get a card in color, then that's a good dream. And you can talk about the dream to the rest of the group, but that just goes away. It doesn't cover up your character sheet. So that's a good dream. We also have a bunch of other writers. We have Morgan Nuncio, who's going to be writing a scenario for us as a stretch goal. We have Kiana Shaw. We have Jabari Weathers coming back for writing. We have Mabel Harper, and we have Jiangshi. So those are just a few of the stretch goal writers. We also have, character sheet upgrades. We have linen cards. We have UV spot coating, all the usual stuff for a better looking product.
Is this going to be a big box? Is it going to be a big book? What form does it take?
Yeah, so it's going to be a box, and inside the box you have 2 books. You have one book that's the main core book with the how to play stuff in it, and then you also have another book full of scenarios and adventures. On top of that, you have 3 decks of cards. You have the restaurant cards, you have the Jiangshi cards, and you have the Hmong cards. So you have those 3 decks. You also have a board. So the board has the restaurant on it. And you also have dice. I think that's everything. Oh, right. And character sheets and spirit paper.
That's a hefty box.
Sounds like everything but the literal kitchen sink.
Exactly.
Well, no, that's on the map on the board of the Chinese food restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's in there.
Well, Banana, I would be remiss if I did not mention to our listeners that you are an absolutely prolific game designer. I wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about some of the things that you can talk about that might be out or coming out, because generally every time I talk to you, there's always things that you can just not tell me. So right now, Lair is out on your website.
Yes, Lair is out. Lair is a game by Tam Mayang, and we've been working on it for a while. Tam's been working on this game for about 5 years. We released it last year, last November, I believe, and now it's up on the website. You could purchase it. It's a worker placement game in a small box, so all the players are supervillains trying to build out their super secret underground lair to appease their big boss, and whoever gets to the end of the score track, builds the best lair, wins the game, and makes their boss happy. So it's a lot of fun. It's very easy to learn. If you're just getting into worker placement or just getting into board games, I highly recommend checking it out.
And now for people who missed the Battle of the Boy Bands Kickstarter, is that going to be hitting your web store soon?
Yes, so we're going to be taking pre-orders for Battle of the Boy Bands, which is another quick introductory game for new gamers. It's basically, players take on the roles of music producers and, music managers, and they try to make the best boy bands by drafting cards and attacking one another with, breaking news cards and defending their own boy bands. And it's really
How
easy.
on earth did I miss this one? This is crazy sound. I love it.
Thank you.
I ordered it. The Apocalypse. You'll play it soon.
All right.
Thank you for the support. Yeah, it's great. The designers for that were Cleo Yunsu Davis and Vicky Ho, who were phenomenal to work with. When we finished, we all had a mukbang with cake. So we just live stream each other, just like eating cake and talking about the game.
I know so many people who are going to love that game. I'm going to finish up this interview and I'm going to tell multiple people about that.
Yeah. And it's one of those things when I was always telling people about it, like, they're like, I don't know. It's a game about being in a boy band. I'm like, what happens when you hear I want it that way? Everybody pops. I defy anybody on this planet to say that is not a banger. So that is awesome as well. One of the things I do really admire about you is that you create all different types of games, and there is no, Banana Chan only makes one kind of game. Like, you've definitely spread your creative wings all over the place, and you've actually worked on something that I am super excited about because I grew up watching this cartoon. July 24th, you had a hand in Scooby-Doo Betrayal at Mystery Mansion.
Yes. Yeah, that was so much fun to work on. Being a huge Scooby-Doo fan myself, it was just awesome, like, watching old episodes again. I had forgotten how weird some of them were.
Oh, yeah.
There's this one episode where they're at a recording studio, and the monster is a disc demon. And it was just really weird. And there was another one where they're at Wimbledon and they're trying to find the warlock of Wimbledon. And it's really weird and really funny. And the warlock has a dog, by the way. So just letting you know.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
Warlocks, dogs, sorceress, cats. It makes total sense.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, I worked on that with Brian Neff, Noah Cohen, and Rob Davio, they were just so much fun to work with. And they were just so supportive in everything. We wrote the haunts together, and we did like development together and everything. So yeah, definitely check that out. I believe there's pre-orders happening right now, but it should be available at Walmart, and I think Target as well.
So all this is incredible. Is there anything else you want to plug?
I would love to plug Dissident Whispers, which my friend Jabari Weathers is working on. They were also working on Jiangshi, so definitely check that out. It's a collection of RPG scenarios, so cool. And they're raising money. Right? The cover is incredible. So Jabari did the cover for that, and I'm just like, oh my God, how? Like, they're good at writing and they're good at art. I'm just like, wow. Anyway, yeah, so they're raising money for Black Lives Matter's bail funds. So definitely check that out. It's up there. It looks so good. I'm so excited for it.
Very cool. So Jiangshi comes out on July 14th on Kickstarter. Everyone, take a second, go over there, check it out. Kickstart this game. Believe me when I say you will never be disappointed with a Banana Chan game. Banana, where can people find you on social media?
People can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Banana Chan Games. And you can find my company, Game in a Curry, at Game in a Curry on Twitter.
Very cool. Banana, thank you so much for sharing your time with me in Student Night, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Thanks so much to Banana Chan for coming on the show today. You can kickstart Jiangshi on July the 14th. It's coming out from Game in a Curry and Wet Ink Games, and this is one not to be missed. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.